Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 18th of February. I'm Laura Cornfield, and this is IBA News, broadcasting from Jerusalem. A government audit criticizing Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his wife Sarah for lavish spending a month away from elections has drawn a harsh response from parties running against the Prime Minister and a defensive posture from Likud. IBA's Eli Wogelanter brings us this report.
Political opponents of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu portrayed the premier as out of touch with average Israelis, following the release of the Comptroller's report yesterday that detailed excessive spending and budgetary practices that were not carried out with integrity and transparency. Zionist Union Party leader Isaac Herzog castigated Netanyahu for a slew of failures beyond the excessive spending. "We don't need the State Comptroller report to know that modest like Menachem Begin you are not," Herzog wrote on Facebook. "The hedonism, the ill treatment of workers, and the spending of public funds makes one's blood boil, but the public wants to replace you not because of your conduct at home, but rather because you ruined our national home." The Yesh Atid party responded to the report saying, "What matters is the citizens, not the carpets." The State Comptroller's report paints a picture that the citizens of Israel understood long ago. On Balfour Street in Jerusalem sits a man who is totally disconnected and for whom the real problems of the people of Israel are the last thing on his mind. And Meretz party leaders Hava Galon condemned Netanyahu's wanton hedonism and the adoption of the corrupt norms more befitting of a banana republic. Netanyahu's Likud party defended the Prime Minister's personal expenses, casting the blame on an ex-employee who was in the midst of a legal battle with the Netanyahus. "It is important to note the expenses of the Prime Minister's residence have been reduced significantly over the past 2 years," a statement from the party said. The expenses significantly increased during a specific period of time when the house's maintenance and operation were directed by Mr. Meni Naftali, an embittered former public employee. The Likud statement said Netanyahu respects the findings and has directed his staff to implement the Comptroller's recommendations. Eli Wogelanter, IBA News.
The president's residence was also taken to task in the State Comptroller's report released for publication yesterday, focusing on the years 2011 to 2014, when President Shimon Peres was in office. The report criticized the fact that deficiencies raised in an earlier report were not fixed. It found that during these years, the president's residence exceeded its budget by 20% to the tune of millions of shekels. In 2014, the annual budget stood at 40.3 million shekels, but was raised to 60.9 million shekels by the end of the year in order to pay employees' salaries, security, and other expenses. The comptroller suggested there should be more coordination with the finance ministry in order to avoid a reoccurrence. The comptroller also faulted the fact that an employee had called to dismiss in the past remained on the payroll for an extended period. The report criticized the fact that 14 employees personally appointed by Peres had been hired without properly being reviewed. According to a new poll commissioned by CNN, a solid majority of Americans say that the Republican leadership erred in inviting Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to address a joint session of Congress. According to the survey, 63% disagreed with the move, while only 33% said it was proper. Earlier polls indicate that a majority of Americans support Netanyahu speaking to Congress on the Iranian nuclear issue.
Inviting the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to Washington to speak before a joint meeting of the U.S. Congress without notifying President Obama was the wrong thing to do. That's what 63% of Americans said in a brand new exclusive CNN ORC poll. Only 33% thought it was the right thing to do. Those numbers only add to the current tension between the U.S. and Israel.
I think the key there is the process. Not giving the heads up to President Obama is what is a part of this question and offensive to most Americans. However, remember the context of when Speaker Boehner rolled out this invitation. It was the day after the State of the Union. The president was on a high coming out of the State of the Union. And this was really a play to the hometown crowd for Republicans, because when you look at the party breakdown in these numbers, a small majority of Republicans Republicans actually thought it was the right thing to do. Independents, Democrats, definitely the wrong thing to do. So that's why you get that number overall, 63%. But for Republicans, they thought it was the right thing to do. And that's why I think you saw Speaker Boehner do this the day after the State of the Union.
You've studied this issue, U.S.-Israeli relations, for a long time. Has an Israeli leader, whether a president of Israel or prime minister of Israel, ever been invited to address a joint meeting of the U.S. Congress without going through the White House, without a president of the United States at least signing off on that?
Well, I think you know the answer to that one. No, this is unprecedented, and it's far beyond a matter of protocol. What it reflects, frankly, is the lack of trust and confidence. The notion that this is a month before the Israeli elections, frankly, is irrelevant. Bill Clinton had Shimon Peres in the Oval, April 30, literally a month before his election runoff with Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, this shows, I think, the profound suspicion, lack of trust, and the other reality is that the end game on Iran is coming, and that's what's driving this.
There must be a clear military consequence if Iran violates a nuclear agreement being negotiated with world powers. That's the view of former U.S. peace negotiator and Middle East expert Dennis Ross, who is in Tel Aviv attending the annual conference of the Institute for National Security Studies. Ross told Israel Television's Yaakov Elon that the invitation to Netanyahu to speak to Congress should never have become a bipartisan issue.
Well, I certainly remember episodes where we've had American presidents and Israeli prime ministers at odds with each other. I don't think there's been quite an occasion like this one having to do with the issue of the Congress, but there certainly have been moments in the past where there's been tension in the relationship and misunderstandings in the relationship. I think one that we're seeing right now is probably, I guess I would characterize as more difficult than some we've seen in the past, but they've been overcome in the past. I assume this one will be overcome as well.
Well, you know that some people, even in Congress, say that Netanyahu should cancel this speech altogether.
Well, I think the question is, what's the purpose of the speech? If the purpose of the speech is to be addressing Iran, I think he could actually get a better hearing on Iran if he were just to do the speech he intends to do at AIPAC and then go do briefings on the Hill. Maybe, you know, even have a collective briefing on the Hill, both on the Senate side and the House side. I think then you would take the partisan nature out of this, which is a real problem right now. Israel has always been an American issue, not a Republican issue or Democratic issue, and the way this was done, unfortunately, it suddenly made it a partisan issue, which doesn't serve Israel's interest, and unfortunately has diverted attention away from the very issue that the Prime Minister wants to address.
Who is really to blame here, in your opinion, Netanyahu or President Obama for this crisis?
Well, obviously there's, I think, differences between both sides, but the fact that you have the Speaker of the House do an invitation behind the backs of his Democratic colleagues means that this was done in a very partisan way, and that, I think, you know, that was a mistake. And sometimes when you make mistakes, you ought to acknowledge them.
It looks like Iran is on the path of becoming a nuclear threshold power. Is this deal is something that keeps you sleepless at night? Are there holes in the deal?
Well, I think if the deal that emerges is one that actually materializes, then I would like to see it combined with something else. I mean, I think if the deal that emerges is one that was combined with a set of consequences, if there's violations, you could go a long way towards addressing one of the vulnerabilities of this deal. This deal could leave Iran as a nuclear threshold state, but if the verification requirements are expansive, meaning they exist anywhere, anytime before declared facilities and undeclared facilities, and if it was clear that if there was a violation where the Iranians were making a move to try to break out to a nuclear weapons capability, that we would make it almost automatic that there would be a use of force, and we would do that by having the administration work out an agreement with the Congress in advance that would authorize the use of force in the event of certain types of violations by the Iranians. Then you could deal with the consequences. You could deal with the concern I might have about leaving Iran as a threshold nuclear state.
Dennis Ross, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Biton, the 4-year-old girl who was critically wounded when her parents' car was stoned near Ariel in Samaria in March of 2013, has died. She was buried at noon today in the Yakir settlement where she lived. The family decided to bury Adele in her hometown despite objections from the Army Civil Administration, which asked that she be buried elsewhere. Earlier, her parents asked Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to intervene and allow the burial to take place in Yakir, even though the settlement has no cemetery. Biton, who suffered severe neurological problems, died from pneumonia Tuesday at Schneider's Children's Hospital in Petah Tikva. Her mother, Adva, told reporters that the severity of the pneumonia was the result of the severe injuries Adele sustained in the 2013 attack. 5 Palestinians were arrested and later charged with throwing stones at the Biton's car that injured the little girl, 2 of her sisters, and her mother. Newly appointed Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Gadi Eisenkot, has wasted no time since taking office several days ago and has announced new appointments to the General Staff. Major General Eyal Zamir has been appointed head of the Army's Southern Command, replacing Major General Sami Turjuman, who was appointed to the post 2 years ago. Brigadier General Amikam Nurkin will head the Army's Planning Directorate. Major General Tamir Hyman has been appointed head of the military colleges, in addition to heading the Northern Corps. Eisenkot also decided to extend the term of Air Force Commander Major General Amir Eshel and Navy Commander Major General Ram Rothberg for an additional year. On Monday, Eisenkot became Israel's 21st Chief of Staff, replacing Lieutenant General Benny Gantz. Ireland's Foreign Minister Charlie Flanagan, currently visiting in Israel, said his country is ready to assist in finding a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He made the statements during a meeting with his Israeli counterpart, Avigdor Lieberman. This morning, Flanagan observed a moment of silence after laying a wreath in the Hall of Remembrance at the Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial Museum and spoke of the need to fight anti-Semitism.
I believe that it isn't sufficient for us to just come here and see and witness. I believe it's essential that we redouble our efforts throughout the world to resist and combat anti-Semitism in all forms. Thank you.
Well, the second major snowstorm of the winter remains on course and is forecast to strike tomorrow afternoon. Meteorologists are saying that snow will start to fall and stick in the north and in the capital, and in all likelihood there will be more accumulation than what we got last month. Snowplows are at the ready, and many residents have prepared by stocking up on their food and other supplies. Meteotech Director Dr. Noah Wolfson joins me now by phone. Dr. Wolfson, thank you so much for speaking to us. Dr. Wolfson, hang on, we're trying to get him on the phone. All right, hopefully we'll get back to that interview very shortly. Let's go on to the next item then. Who among us doesn't fantasize about finding a treasure of gold coins? Divers in the ancient port of Caesarea discovered the largest hoard of gold coins ever found off the Israeli coast and alerted the Antiquities Authority. IBA's Ari O'Sullivan got a chance to see the priceless hoard and filed this report.
Deep in the vaults of the Antiquities Authority is a room of treasures, but none more priceless than this hoard of gold coins minted about 1,000 years ago and buried at sea off the coast of Caesarea. Civilian divers spotted a few shiny coins and alerted the Antiquities Authority, who performed a quick sweep, netting over 2,000 coins. They were brought here where Dr. Robert Cook, the curator of the coin department, examined each one.
I've been working here for 23 years, and I've never ever seen a thing like this. This is the largest gold hoard we have found so far. And I've been asking around people that have been longer in the field than me, and as far as I know, this is really the largest hoard ever found here.
Now, why is that? Because people were honest?
Yes. I mean, the guys who found this hoard, the divers, I think, they're real good citizens. I mean, it's fantastic that people, this is how we should behave, I mean, we don't have an antiquities law like in England where you get part of the treasure. I mean, everything that's in the ground is part of the State of Israel, and that's it. I mean, you don't get any refund or any percentage. And I think it's fantastic because this is like, it's a real treasure, not only a treasure in terms of money, it's a scientific treasure. It's a cultural treasure, and it belongs to the State of Israel and for everybody to see and to behold.
The earliest coins were minted in Sicily in the 9th century, and the latest was from 1036, all from the wealthy Fatimid period. Archaeologists believe the treasure was likely taxes destined for Cairo.
How much is it worth?
It's priceless. It's priceless. I mean, you can give it a price in economic terms, probably. You can calculate the gold in terms of the gold price, but as far as we're concerned, it's priceless.
Mm-hmm. Once the Antiquities Authority has made sure that the entire hoard has been recovered and the coins examined, they plan to display it.
Gold is a different way. It's a different story. People relate differently to gold. I don't know what it is. I mean, people are obsessed by gold.
It's certainly more shiny.
For sure it is.
Ari O'Sullivan for IBA News.
Okay, we have Dr. Wolfson now on the line. Dr. Wolfson, thanks so much for speaking with us.
No problem.
Doctor, how much accumulation are we expecting exactly in Jerusalem and the higher elevations?
This is an excellent question. We do anticipate that we will have 50 or might even have 60 centimeters of snow. This is a very heavy storm, yet we are not reaching the record for Jerusalem, actually. But it's a heavy snow.
How long is the snow expected to last?
About 2 to 3 days. It would start Thursday afternoon or Thursday morning with light snow, will continue and become heavier, and will continue at least till Friday morning.
So you're not expecting it to continue through Saturday, even perhaps Sunday?
No, definitely not. On Saturday, all snow would cease, definitely. I mean, it wouldn't be clear, it wouldn't be fun, but it would be winter, but there's no snow on Saturday onwards.
Are you expecting that the storm will cause major or only minor road closures?
Well, I would anticipate that unless you are very well prepared for 60 centimeters, this is a major road closure. In Israel, everywhere, actually, 60 centimeters, you can't move, really.
You suggested that this is going to be less severe than the snowstorm last year. But do you think it'll be severe enough to close the capital down completely?
It depends really how they clean the roads. You know, you can clean the roads if you are ready, if you have salt, if you have heavy vehicles to clean the road, you may move. But on trees, it would exert a toll because it's heavy and trees might be broken. But I think the authorities are very well aware this time. I know the emergency room is opening this very evening. We have sent a forecaster there, so the authorities are ready. So I anticipate that the roads would be, let's say, movable.
Dr. Noah Wolfson from Mediotech, thank you so much for joining us, and let's hope for a quiet, easy weekend. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
In other news, Argentina wants the United States to help it get to the bottom of the deadly 1994 bombing at the heart of the current political scandal that threatens to indict President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner. Foreign Minister Hector Timmermans sent a letter to Secretary of State John Kerry asking the United States to include the Jewish Community Center bombing in current nuclear negotiations with Iran. Argentinian courts have accused Iran of planning the attack that killed 85 people. Until now, the United States and the other world powers have refused Argentinian requests, insisting that talks with Iran must stay focused on concerns over Iran's atomic program. The issue is the backdrop for the January 18th death of the Argentinian prosecutor, Alberto Nisman, who headed the bombing investigation and accused President Fernández de Kirchner of conspiring with Iran to whitewash the crime in order to clinch a grains for oil deal. Coming back to the findings in the latest State Comptroller report, I'm joined in the studio now by Michael Pardum from the Movement for Quality Government. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
The reports on the President and the Prime Minister's residence came out at the same time. Would you say the criticism leveled by the State Comptroller was about equivalent?
Equal between the Prime Minister's office and the President's office. It's not equivalent. It's in this respect that the State Comptroller called for a better budgetary process for both the President's office and the Prime Minister's residence. In both cases, he found that the budgets were either wrong, understated, or underplanned, or simply not transparent. So I think in that respect, they're common. In other regards, it seems that he's less focused on mismanagement and potential criminal activity in the president's office, while with the prime minister's office he did find significant and troubling instances of mismanagement.
Would you agree that the report of the prime minister's residence leaves a sense of corruption?
I think, you know, the sums involved are small, and we're talking about, you know, ostensibly minor issues. However, there is a feeling that, you know, these minor issues are an expression of a greater malaise, and that, you know, if you can't manage the prime minister's office properly, then what happens when we're talking about much larger issues such as the gas or the defense budget?
The excesses reported in the report are certainly distasteful, but are they in fact criminal?
It's not clear whether they're criminal. Some instances have been referred to the Attorney General, who will conduct his own review and find if there has been, you know, alleged criminality or not. But they're severe enough so that the State Controller did send them to the Attorney General for further review.
Who is ultimately responsible for wrongdoing in the Prime Minister's office?
Well, I think, you know, everything has to be, you know, every case has to be looked at separately, its own distinct action. But the State Controller recommended to the Knesset and to the government that there be much stricter and much more transparent budgetary processes involving the Prime Minister's office and residence. In fact, when the State Controller started investigating matters, it did find that there was a significant decrease
in spending from the previous years.
I would say a decrease in wastage, so that the light of day was a very effective, or is a very effective solvent and cleaner in trying to you know, produce better procedures and better management in the Prime Minister's office. So that there is hope that because of, you know, the State Controller, the Attorney General, the publicity surrounding everything, that there will be progress made in producing better outcomes for the Prime Minister's office.
As you mentioned, the report findings are being reviewed by the State Attorney's Office and then be passed over to the Attorney General. Do you think a decision on the findings should be released before the elections?
Not necessarily. First of all, we pressed, the movement and organization, other organizations pressed very strongly that this report be released prior to the elections. And I'm very pleased that it has been released prior to the elections because, one, the public has a right to know.
Certainly.
And two, I don't think we'd get the publicity that we would have and the public discussion, the spirited in public discussion that we have if it were at a different time period. On the other hand, matters of alleged criminal conduct, I don't want to you know, discount them entirely, but I don't think the State Controller's report is not quite as severe as his political opponents would make out.
Michael Parham from the Movement for Quality Government, thanks so much for coming in.
You're very welcome.
This year's winner is Nadav Gedge. The 16-year-old singer will represent Israel in the prestigious Eurovision Song Contest in Vienna in May. The youngest performer ever to represent Israel, Gedge earned the berth by defeating 3 other finalists in the Next Star reality TV show. Gedge wooed the judges with renditions of Beyoncé's Crazy in Love and John Lennon's Legend. Israel has won the Eurovision 3 times in the past, but has failed to make it to the finals for the last 4 years. The Eurovision contest is now in its 60th year and is considered the continent's most prestigious talent show, watched by up to 600 million viewers worldwide. In local money matters, the shekel strengthened in foreign currency trading while shares were up on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. Here are the late afternoon numbers. And as we heard a short time ago, snow is on its way. Here's the forecast at home and abroad over the next 24 hours. And thanks for being with us this evening. We'll be back tomorrow at the same time for more breaking news from Israel and abroad. Until then, I'm Laura Cornfield, wishing you a good evening and shalom from Jerusalem.